Thanks so much for being here. So I'm going to talk about quantum physics and hacker attacks. How can this be both in the same sentence? Well, recently we've seen a lot of attacks, the effects of cyber attacks on business world, and in particular the attack on Sing Health, where personal data of 1.5 million patients has been compromised, was extremely severe and the strongest in Singapore so far. But there's also other attacks, like the one at Yahoo, where 3 billion records of personal data have been compromised, and they're likely to get worse. In not only the business world is affected, but also the public sector is affected. And you've probably heard of the state-sponsored hackers that are using stolen data to manipulate election outcomes in many countries. Well, there's one example of the National Parliament of Germany, actually, where there's a large compromise of personal data and very private data to the government. And also, of course, the email theft of the US Democratic National Committee. So whether the private sector or public sector, none of them are spared, and it's likely to get even more worse. So as computing technologies actually advance and become more powerful, our systems that help us to encrypt our data are actually becoming more vulnerable. On the rise is also another new computing technology called quantum computing, which leverages the fundamental laws of nature to actually deliver an inconceivable leap in computational power. And it's so powerful that it can break many of the encryption systems that are in use today, whether at cloud providers or in data centers. So fear not, because the apocalypse is not really here yet. Quantum computing is still in the labs, it's still in research institutions and academia around the world, and it's probably likely to be a few more years until it becomes, it can be to any practical use. But at the same time, there is actually a great breakthrough in the world of quantum and using quantum effects to make encryption stronger. So to illustrate this, I want to deep dive a little bit about what encryption is and how it's come to be. And then I'll talk about how quantum computing actually affects this. So for this, I'll need just a briefcase and some documents that you want to send to your friend and a lock to keep it all safe. Actually, we're going to use a combination lock that is quite special because it's going to turn all the text in the document into random numbers. So when this briefcase is on its way to your friend, you give him a call and you tell him the code of the combination lock. So when he receives the briefcase, he enters the code, and voila, basically the document is unscrambled, and you've just sent him a encoded message. So this is really a basic example of what encryption is like and how it's actually that your data that you're putting into your phone and storing somewhere in the cloud is encrypted. It also illustrates 3 fundamental things about encryption. And so we have one, the code, which is called the encryption key. And you can think of it as like a password, for example. The second one is the call to your friend. And this is called the key exchange. So it's a way of getting the encryption key to a third party safely. And lastly, the lock. So the lock is the thing that encodes and decodes the document in this briefcase. And it's called an encryption algorithm. This encryption algorithm, actually a good encryption algorithm, basically scrambles the document into random numbers so that without a key, it will be quite useless to anyone looking at it. So it's really these things, and with the the rise of computational power, they're actually putting a threat to many of these encryption exchange, key exchange techniques. One of the most popular one in the world used today is called RSA. And it's been around since 1977. And back then, when it was first invented, they had a 426-bit key. And they thought, well, we have the most secure key, and it actually takes more than a quadrillion years to break the cipher. Well, reality hit, and just 17 years later, this cipher was actually broken. And this is because they didn't take into account the rise in in computational power. So today, actually, we use 4,096-bit keys that are quite commonly used, or 2,048-bit keys. But even those with quantum computing on the rise are just child's play, and they're really not a match to the intense increase in computational power that lies ahead. So I said it's everything's terrible, everything's bad, but actually there have been major breakthroughs in the world of encryption using quantum effects, and these actually highlight two problems. So one is what I mentioned before, the encryption keys. So you need high quality keys. And the second one is this key exchange. So we use the phone, but right now everything is transmitted through the fiber optic anyway. But how can these two factors actually be improved by quantum computing? Well, the first problem is with these keys, and let's start there. So right now encryption keys, sort of like your password manager, they're generated by a software. And anything that's generated by a software has some sort of pattern to it. So they're not actually random. They're not truly random. And if you have enough examples, you can actually predict what the next sequence will be like. It's sort of like if you know a sequence of 1, 3, 3, 7, and you're going to predict what the next number shall be like. Well, this attack actually has been subject in a very creative attack recently on casinos, where cybercriminals have recorded and analyzed the spins of slot machines. So the output of these slot machines have been recorded. They've analyzed that and were able to reverse engineer based on this amount of data that they gathered. They were able to reverse engineer the underlying number generator. So the spins are never random because it's software in the end. So they were able to reverse engineer this, and very creatively, they were able to predict with high accuracy the next spins. Obviously, this led to a huge financial gain for them, and they were happy, the casino not so much. This example, even though it's for casinos and it's talking about slot machines, this is very much can be the same case in the case for encryption keys. What quantum actually can help is that we can use, so this problem is not new to the world of encryption, and it's been around. The problem is that so far we've only tried to solve it with software, and the designs or configurations of the software actually has not been possible to create this true random number generator until we've used these quantum effects, because the quantum world is actually truly random. So particles are truly random. And these truly random number generators, these devices that are measuring quantum effects, they're now used by, in test phases by cloud providers, banks, and government agencies. Typical places in business where you would think that these should be the most secure places. Well, what these devices are, they're not massive computers or machines. They're actually just miniaturized PCI cards that just plug into every standard computer port. And they're able to produce 1 billion numbers per second, but actually there's an endless number of random numbers that they can generate at really high speeds. So making it a truly random key. The second problem is, I mentioned, with the current key exchange methods, so RSA and so on, well, the current key exchange methods don't stand up to the power of quantum computing because this computational power is so intense that it can just brute force these key exchange methods. Well, the quantum world does have a solution to this, a theoretical solution to this problem as well. And it's called quantum key distribution. And what quantum key distribution, or QKD, does, it leverages a fundamental characteristics of quantum physics. So you may have heard of like the Heisenberg principle, where you cannot observe or know the momentum of a particle at any point of time. It's using exactly this principle where if you observe or if you look at a quantum particle, it actually changes its nature. So to illustrate this example, let me bring up the example we had before of exchanging the keys or the code with your friend. Just this time, when we're exchanging the keys, we're not calling him on the phone, but we're using quantum effects on a laser transferred using a fiber optic cable. And so if an attacker wants to, or if an attacker intercepts the key exchange or the quantum keys while they're in transit, it actually leaves a unique fingerprint behind, informing the sender and the receiver that these keys have been tampered with, and you're able to detect that there is something wrong with the keys and discard them accordingly before using them. So this makes the system more secure. And actually, using this, we can make quantum computers also help us fight against bad quantum computer players, because it's all based on the laws of physics. Not even quantum computers can break these kind of security measures. Now I said, okay, quantum computers are still a few years in the making, but the world, or the Internet of Things, is really ringing in a networked era of 30 billion devices in 2020. And for our society to function in this new world, we need trust in the system. And we've heard talks before that blockchain can be one of those providers of trust, and I totally agree. But I also believe that quantum technologies can be a fundamental driver and provider of this trust in the system, helping us or allowing us to actually benefit and build these awesome technologies and innovations. Now, quantum computing is still in the making. Maybe in a decade or so we can use it actually in production. But right now there are several companies that, like IBM or even Alibaba or Rigetti, a startup, that make these quantum technologies available to us in a safe environment where we can test it out. And I urge you guys to check it out and just prepare yourself for the next quantum leap. Thank you so much.